And every step of the way, there's a way to make things easier, better, more focused, more convenient. And yet, what if I told you that there's a way, and the way is to choose chaos, to embrace difficulties, to persevere through focus keeping, to power through the lack of cheese stops, to keep adding light until there's no more darkness. I want to talk about vintage lenses.
Oil.
And forward. You can get very intimate with your subjects. This is a 35mm lens. A softbox coming at me from my left. Have a little counter light shining there. You want to know the truth? You can't handle the truth. Boss, these are very cinematic lenses. There's a reason why I have a classic Volvo on the screen right here. And the reason is simple. I want to talk about vintage lenses. Vintage lenses are being sold as a Porsche 911, as a classic Ferrari. Some of them are. Some of them are being undersold, for different reasons. Now, why would you pick a vintage lens over a new one? A new one has autofocus, it has perfect color chart, your chart, your chromaticity, whatever. It's perfect, right? And it is. It's good. And it feels good, and it's right. And the colors, they pop, And then, they also do not leak oil. They don't smell of oil, Did you know that vintage lenses leak oil? They do. They smell like oil, just like vintage cars. I have had the pleasure of instructing first AC to do, or second AC to do focus. And they couldn't do focus. The motor would skip every single time. But the images we got. Oh, the halation, the fringe unsharpness, the je ne sais quoi was all worth it. I have tests right here for how these lenses look and what they look like. And I began building my set of Zeiss Jenas from visiting a store in my hometown that used to have all kinds of new fancy gear. And then they had this yellow case from a DJI drone. A DJI drone from the early 2010s. You know, nobody needed it anymore. So I thought, why don't I just buy it? You know, and it will be a home for them. You know, I started building from a foundation. You know, I gotta have a place to keep them. And then I bought 3 lenses from a UK eBay seller for a very good price. And then one of those lenses failed on the shoot, and I repaired it, and it failed again. And I went to a repair guy, and it failed again. And eventually, I've hit a rock bottom. You know, I thought, well, what am I gonna do? You know, I have this part of my set. I have a 35, 50, 135. And so I decide to be wise and smart about it. I decide to buy the same lens from eBay all over again. And there's your gambling lens roulette. And I bought it and I replaced it. And then the other lens is in pieces for all intensive purposes. You know, it's useless. So that way I had a 35, 50, and 135 millimeter Zeiss Jena Flektagon series MC. And I thought, well, you know, they can't just be 3 lenses because I need a wide one. And I looked no further but to good old eBay for a listing not sold from Japan in as new condition in a box. It says Jena Flektagon 20 millimeter f2.8 or t2.8 depending on which side of the autism spectrum you're on. But I got it. And it was brand new. It was in the packaging of the 60s from Japan. You know how Japan is with their stuff. And it was great. It was amazing. It's a special lens, you know. And another thing that is special about it is that it is not sharp in the corners at all. A 2.8, a 4, a 5.6, I don't care. It's not sharp in the corners. I'm gonna put in a still shot right here, and you're gonna see that in the corners, no way, Jose, there is no way that you're gonna get sharp in the corners with the lens like this. And I loved it, and I still do. So that way I thought, well, since they made a 20, 35, a 50, and 135, what's happened in between? What happened to the 85? And you know what? They didn't make one. At least not the one that is, in my opinion, more or less reliably used in the film production. And you know, you're talking reliability and vintage lenses. But I found a listing for an 85mm Jupiter 9 lens, which is, you know, if you squint your eyes, it's a Zeiss Biotar lens from the Germany, Eastern Bloc Germany, right? So it's the same exact lens. And I thought, well, I could then name it Zeiss and just like put a sticker on it, and like nobody would ever know, but because I have an 85 that's actually usable, and it's a good one. It's not a contrast full lens, you know, but it has this special kind of, I don't know, grain kind of like aesthetic to it, and I love it. Then now I have a 20, 35, 50, 85, and 135. You know, and my set is complete. And what do I do with it? I put it on a 12K cinema camera, which was not a good idea. The idea of putting a vintage lens on a 12K sensor camera, even though it's a 12K downsample to 4K, all those flaws, all those optical things that you see on the lens charts, and you see, well, there's your corner fringing, and there's your halation, and there's blah, yada, yada. It all comes like glaring in your face, you know. So what do? You slap softening filters on it, you know. You try to position it, to position the filters, to position the lights. You try to work really hard, you know. And in the professional environment with lenses that are perfect, you know, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to work hard, you know. It's supposed to do most of the pretty, I'll look pretty, look at me for you, but not the case. Not the case with vintage lenses. So, with that being said, do I recommend vintage lenses? And I asked the same question looking at this Volvo. Do you like vintage cars? I do. I love vintage cars. Every time I see a vintage car passing down the road, I'm like, ooh, that guy in the meme who looks at the girl. I'm like, my girl's walking with me. I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. I looked at the road for too long. I love classic cars, and I love everything that comes with cars. Like being stuck on the side of the road and it being your story. Lenses that tell story, cars that tell stories, things that tell stories, as opposed to things that are convenient and good and stable and reliable. Is there a middle ground? It's a good question. And I don't think it is. I don't think there is. And I don't think there is. So I wouldn't say that there are two extremes. DZO and Nisi and other brands have come up with amazing lenses that look characteristics but are still reliable. And I don't think that we're in a world where we have to use vintage lenses. But it's nice to have a set, I think I'll hang on to my set, And there it is. There's that yellow case. So, do you like vintage lenses? What's your favorite vintage lens? What do you think is the most important thing in the vintage lens set? To me, it's seriality, I don't want to be a snob about it and say like, well, this number doesn't correspond with this year, so I can't use these lenses. And it's like, no, get out of here, okay? Not a channel for you, but seriality within reason, because think about it. There is nothing dumber than trying to ascertain perfection of a vintage lens from charts and the perfection of different lenses from charts. It's pointless. It's a pointless exercise. You're looking at a Volvo. It used to make 160, 30 horsepower. Now it's making 98, and the other one is making 100-ish. And you're trying to compare them all. No, nobody. No. Forget about it. Just use it for what it is. Don't get too deep inside. Don't try to rearrange it and modify it, and don't go in there, okay? Because once you go in there, shit starts falling apart. Oh, that spring is gone, or that thing, that sprocket, look, just like pray that it works, pray that it exists, enjoy it for as long as you can, and if you can't, then just sail it down the road and get another one. That's my best advice when it comes to vintage stuff. In general, not just vintage lenses, vintage cameras, vintage record players, whatever it is, this is about enjoyment in the moment, more than trying to find a perfect one, out of a sea of imperfect things. Especially we didn't have computing technology, those things right behind me, that thing, we didn't have those, we couldn't calculate, So I've talked for too long. And I want to hear your thoughts, and I want to read your thoughts. Drop in the comments which is your favorite vintage lens or vintage thing, and what's your experience with maintaining it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.